So for essay 4, I chose to write about Betsy DeVos and whether she's credible or not as the Secretary of Education of the United States under the Trump administration. Betsy DeVos has been a very controversial topic in terms of education and what she can bring to the table as a Secretary of Education. And personally, I do not think that she's a credible person to be in this position. Um, because of things that she says and the quotes that she has been known to say in terms of asking deep questions in terms of education for the United States and public education. So I am using my PowerPoint to lead this video. So bear with me if I look away. So my first topic is Betsy DeVos's knowledge of clear and simple topics under education. If anybody is in the field of education, they should know these topics. So in one instance, she was asked in a press conference whether she knew the difference between proficiency and growth in terms of schooling and children in schools. And she couldn't seem to discern the difference between them and give a concrete answer to the question because of lack of knowledge. So that's one way to discredit Betsy DeVos as the Secretary of Education, because if you're in the field of education, you should be able to know and should be able to answer these questions with ease, especially a question like that. In the second instance, she was asked about guns in schools and gun laws and how to protect our schools. And she deflected the question by talking about bear attacks, which have no inkling of connection to schools. Schools have zero bear attacks when there have been 210 almost mass shootings in the U.S., and some of those were at schools. So her lack to address a very major problem in the U.S., especially in schools where children are put in danger, also discredit her, especially when she goes to reference bear attacks that have never happened in the school system ever, in any city, in anywhere in the U.S. That's just really not right, especially her being the Secretary of Education and going to lead education for the country while we're under this presidential administration. Also, she has seemed to be very unfamiliar with the with the federal law that protects students with disabilities. And that's the Individual with Disabilities Education Act. And this protects students with disabilities to get an education, to be treated fairly in schools, and to accommodate their disability in schools. While Betsy DeVos did not even didn't know a thing about this law, and did not address it how it should be. So I feel like she's not credible to be in this position. Number one, because she had a private education, and she has no experience with urban education at all, and no experience with urban students at all. So, that being said, since most of the students who go to school in this country go to a public and urban institution, she needs to be able to have an idea of how publicly urban schools are run, but she doesn't, and she did not care to do the research to learn about how to run these schools and keep them going as a Secretary of Education. She also was asked if she would consider to continue funding for public schools in the U.S., and she could not say whether she would do that or not because she has no knowledge of the public schools and how they run. Also, she does not see the benefit of public schools since she looks at only the results that public schools get for children, and she just sees that as a performance-based, business-based schools. So she's saying why fund them if they're not performing well? But her job as Secretary of Education is to fund these schools to make them better, to get them more resources to benefit their children. But instead, she just deflects it by not by neglecting to answer the question in terms of funding for public schools. She also deflected a question that asks if schools should be held to a certain standard of accountability. She deflected this question because she's already not considering funding public schools, and she did not want to answer the question because she knows that that's a very controversial answer to make, especially when the majority of students go to public schools. And she personally, schools could be held accountable, but at the end of the day, she needs to be held accountable for the answers that she gives in terms of how she's going to support schools, because she's the Secretary of Education. So Betsy DeVos is the Secretary of Education, but I really feel like she and her ties with the Republican Party really got her this position, meaning that no professional records that she has shown or proven have gotten her this job based on merit. She got the job based on her family's contribution to the Republican Party, which further discredits her as a proper Secretary of Education for the U.S.